Welcome to today's topic of engaging students through active learning. Now, in my position, I work with a lot of faculty across campus, and they ask themselves some of these questions, which may be some of the ones that you're asking also. So here's one. Here's another one. Here's another one. And finally, how can I get them more excited to learn about the material? Now, why are they asking questions like this? Maybe we take a peek into their classroom, we might see this. Maybe so, but not to that extreme. But we are looking at things like this. And we can also be looking at classes like this. And so whether it's a small class or a large auditorium across a wide sea of faces, we are asking ourselves some of these kind of questions also. Are they confused? A little bit is okay, but not too much where it's overwhelming. They're passive. Are they paying attention? Or maybe are they bored? They don't have any interest? Or maybe they do want to ask a question or make a statement, but there wasn't any opportunity because maybe I lectured too much. I just did a traditional lecture the whole time and they didn't have an opportunity to be engaged. So let's think again about this topic, which is engaging students through active learning, and we're asking some of these questions that we are interested in knowing. So, what is the difference? Students being active, they're talking with each other, they're pointing, they're writing, they're moving around, and they are actively learning, or what we might say engaged and being participating. So, just like you're asking questions about your students, I also have questions about you. So, let's take a poll. And it's going to be about active learning. So let's go and look at a couple of these questions. If I were in front of you, I may ask you to raise your hand. How many of you have never heard of active learning? Well, I've heard of it, but I don't really have an official definition of it. Or maybe I do have some idea, and you know what? I implement active learning strategies already. Or maybe a fourth option is, move over, Cheelan, I can give a session on active learning. Now, this is really important because I get some information about you and I can make changes or additions based on what I've just learned about you. So, this is something I think is really important. A quote from Herbert Simon, and he says, learning results from what the student does and think, and only from what the student does and think. That is what learning is. Now, what is your role as a teacher? You can advance learning only by influencing what the student does to learn. Notice that verb, does to learn. And so I found another image that's really pretty good, and it's teaching and learning, and it talks about the interaction between them and how they're symbiotic, and that teaching without learning is not teaching. Actually, you could say it's just talking. So here are the learning objectives for this session. Upon successful completion of this session, you will be able to, and I'll let you read the verbs, but I want to make you take note of define, you're going to discuss, you're going to analyze, and you're going to incorporate. All right, let's begin. I'm going to give you a quiz. And you're going, what? Wait, no, that's not fair, Cheelan. This is really stressful. You're going to give me a quiz on something, and we just started. All right, let me do this. Does this make you feel better? This is called an in-class activity. And what I want to do is get some information about you and see what your thoughts are about active learning and maybe some lecturing. So get a piece of paper and number it 1 through 5, and all you have to do is write a T or an F. All right? And don't think too hard about it. Okay, I hope you didn't think too hard. Now you're going to say, you know what, Cheelan, you didn't teach me this content yet, and that's true, but you will be learning it by the end of the session. So hang in there because you'll be able to answer all these and hopefully all correct by the end of this session. So engaging students in your class, we use that word a lot. There's 3 kinds of student engagement. I want you to take note of this. The first one is called cognitive. And we think about cognitive engagement. We're thinking things like maybe in Bloom's taxonomy, maybe at the higher level, like analyze, create, evaluate. it's not at the levels of define. Can you tell me the answer to? Because that's not really stimulating. Another one that you might want to call is emotional engagement, and those are things that resonate with the heart. And so they might things like curiosity, motivation, maybe something even a little bit negative like apathy, but just a little bit on it. And if you're emotionally engaged, like maybe watching a TV show or doing a hobby or listening to a podcast, we find that they tend to invest more time and effort. So a positive emotional engagement is very good. And not only that, you know what it will do? In times of hardship or something, the student will persevere during these times and just proceed onward. The third one is called behavioral engagement, and these are the physical representation of cognitive and emotional engagement on there. And what are we going to see? We're going to see things like smiling, writing, moving around, sharing things like that. And an additional indicator of a behavioral engagement is time on task. They tend to spend a little bit more time. So take note, 3 kinds of engagement: cognitive, emotional, and behavioral. So I want to learn a little bit more about what you know about active learning. So get a piece of paper again, and we're going to jot down some of your thoughts on there. So student concentration declines after how many minutes do you think? Now this is a traditional lecture class. Imagine maybe 50 minutes, okay? What do you think? Some of the thoughts? 5, 20. Oh, they're engaged the whole 50 minutes? No. Traditionally, we find out that the student concentration, and that means really all learners, declines after 10 to 15 minutes. Now, students are not attentive about what percentage of the time. Is it 100%? Is it 5%? What do you think it is? What it is that it's 40% of the time they're not engaged. They're not thinking about what you're saying or doing. Now, let's go about in the class session itself. How much do students retain at the first 10 minutes versus the last 10 minutes of your class? Did any of you guess this? 70% of the time from the first 10 minutes, 20% of the material from the last 10 minutes. Now, we're from a research institution. Research is really important, and we try to learn from this. What have you learned from this research that we just showed you about your teaching? And I'm going to let you think about this for a second. Okay, so what do we say? Think about if a 50-minute class, break it up into little chunks, maybe about 10 or 15 minutes, because we know they are not 100% of the time engaged with you. They're just overload. They can't remember that much on there. Maybe they happen to sneeze at that point and they won't get to hear. So make sure you do it in small chunks, about 10 or 15. If you can go and it's not really difficult, maybe 20 minutes on there. Whenever in terms of scheduling, try to put the most important stuff at the beginning of your class. A lot of times when we all do this, we tend to put in announcements in there, and don't forget to do that and this. But remember, their attention span is the best of the first 10 minutes. Then what should we do in the last 10 minutes? Well, you're looking at your clock and going, oh my gosh, I really need to hurry, so I'm just going to cram in a whole bunch of new content. Wrong thing to do. This is a great time to do some closure. Maybe you can say, what did you learn? What was the most important thing? Maybe you even want to give a preview of the next class session, but not new content on there. Now, I want to tell you another story. Well, it's actually a research study. And so what happens is that there was a psychology class, and these students stayed with them for a whole semester. And as typical, we give them a final exam. So psych students stayed with you a full semester, takes a final exam. Now imagine that this professor goes out and grabs these students off of the campus, and he says, come in here. I want you to also take this same psychology final exam. Don't worry, I just want you to take it out. So they did. And you're going, okay, this is really weird. But the really interesting thing is 4 months later, What did he do? He went and got all of those students that he had in his psych class, and he gave them the same final exam. He was able to get all the students that he was walking around campus, and they said, you take the same one again. Now, you would imagine that those psych students who stayed with you a full semester would do better than these students that were just taking a stroll on campus, right? Well, yeah, you're right. They did do better. Did that make you feel good? It probably did. But you know what? How much better did they do than those random students? 8%. 8% after a full semester, and they lost that much. Okay, I want you to think about that. That was rather sobering. So, here it is. Students typically learn mostly just factual material, and that's probably because that's all we really give them. And you know what? And the amount of factual material that we give them is more than what they can learn. So, I'm going to give you some more things to think about. Every time you see that little icon, that means you're either going to have to think about something or do something. So here's another research study. They looked at 3 kinds of classes, and they did an analysis of the content. A high density class means there's 90% new information in this session, in this one class session. Medium density means 70% new information. Low density means 50% new information. Now, which of these 3, high, medium, and low, in terms of the amount of new content that was presented, was the most effective? And most effective means the students understood it, they got it, and they retained the information. I hope that some of you, all of you, chose this one, low density. And you're going, well, wait a minute, what are you supposed to do the rest of the time? It's 50 minutes, and I only gave 50% new information. Well, I want you to remember this. The amount of new information presented often exceeds the limit of what students can learn. So what do they need to be doing? They need to be practicing what they just learned. So here's another great strategy that I want you to do. It's called, like I'm going to chunk into a time where you can think. And it's called Hitting Pause, a great book. And I want you to take a minute to jot down some notes that you learned from the very beginning of this video to now. What was the most important thing? What was the most surprising thing or valuable thing you learned? So, the learning objective, we only had one, and it's really important, is you're to be able to define active learning, and you really didn't quite, but got close to it, and 3 types of student engagement. And we've got 3 more to go. So this is the end of part A, and I will see you in a little bit. Thank you.